Welcome to the CLIMACT Joint UNIL and EPFL Ideas and Actions seminar series. So I'm Julia Steinberger and I'm your host today. So just a few words of welcome. So what is CLIMACT? CLIMACT is a joint EPFL UNIL center. It's a platform to highlight climate research and teaching and raise ambition on climate action. The Ideas and Actions seminars are every second Monday at this time. Across topics, across institutions, across speakers. And the main idea is to try to generate some thinking about how we can go raise ambition and go beyond what is already done. The seminars are now, the older seminars are on YouTube. Please be nice to each other. Please do the usual things that you do on Zoom. Keep yourself muted unless you're speaking, etc. To ask questions, you can ask them in the chat or raise your hand. And today's speakers are that we're really excited to host are Oceane Dayer, co-chair of Sustainable Development Solutions Network Switzerland, and that will be followed by Marie-Elodie Perga of Faculty of Geosciences and Environment at the University of Lausanne, and Fabrizio Butera, who's on the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, also University of Lausanne. So we are looking forward to that. And Océane, and next week we will have exciting speakers too, but we'll get to those afterwards. So Océane, the floor is yours. I will now stop sharing. And we'll start waving or shouting at you if you go over time. You have sort of 15-20 minutes to leave time for speaking.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your nice words and for the floor. So I'll share my screen with you. Always the same. We hope it works as I planned. So, is that working? Everyone see my screen? Perfect. Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Oceane Dayer, and I'm one of the two co-chair of the Sustainable Development Solution Network Switzerland. Janet Herring is my co-chair. She's also on the call today. So if you have specific questions or inputs, we're very happy. Both of us are very happy to answer them and take note. So I'm very pleased to be here and to give you a little tour d'horizon on what we are, who we are at SDS in Switzerland and what we do. So just a little bit of history. In 2012, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon launched the UN Sustainable Development Solution Network, the global network, in order to mobilize global scientific and technological expertise to promote practical problem solving for sustainable development. So in short and much easier to understand, it is about implementing the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the Paris Agreement on climate change. Following their adoption, the adoption of the SDGs, SDSN is committed to supporting the implementation at local, national, and global level. And to this end, we work with partners in academia, government, business, civil society, and of course the United Nations to promote practical solution and transformation. Yes, this is a little bit for the global network. What is the purpose of the network? We aim at providing analysis and recommendations to support the implementation of the SDGs. We try to bring together a global network of problem solvers. We develop solution initiatives and long-term transformation pathways, those pathways that we need in order to reach the SDGs, but that we also need to develop in a participatory manner if we really want them to bring the change that we need. And we also want to foster education for sustainable development. So basically what does that mean for Switzerland? So SDSN Switzerland is the little Swiss antenna of the global network, and we're trying to implement the SDGs here in Switzerland. The SDS in Switzerland is being carried by two major organizations. One is BioVision, and the other one is the Center for Development and Environment of the University of Bern. Probably several of you know both of those organizations. We have a leadership council, we have a secretariat who supports and implements the strategy, and Janet and I are co-leading this leadership council. What are the focuses of SDSN Switzerland? We try to shape a multi-stakeholder dialogue around the SDGs and sustainable development. We foster transformative solutions towards sustainable development, and we try as good as we can to advise decisions maker. What it really means is that while shaping multi-stakeholder dialogue means accelerate continuous exchange of ideas and experience within our community. Foster transformative solution is about harnessing scientific and transdisciplinary knowledge to generate new evidence-based solutions, and to integrate those in policies and systemic change. What we do in our consulting work for decision maker is that we really try to offer evidence-based advice for politics, but also for business and society in general, in order to fill the policy gaps that we see in sustainable development. So who is the SDSN? So SDSN Switzerland is not just an organization, it's a network. And it is our strength, and we want to work as a network and not as an organization. So we have 42 members here in Switzerland that all brings their expertise, their story around sustainable development. And we're really a catalysator. I'm not really sure how you say that in English, but I guess you know what I mean, for their work. And to really, like, we try to be this link to create a participatory process for developing solutions for sustainable development, but also for implementing them. The highlights of our work in our community and in order to create this multi-stakeholder dialogue is through our events. We try to organize different and interesting events, be it conference, assembly, workshop, webinars, and we try to really strengthen this collaboration between research, policy, business, and practitioners, because slowly it's really a no-brainer that we'll never reach sustainable development without the collaboration of these actors. We try to bring those actors together and develop a common language for SDGs, because what we've realized in the first years of working with our partners and members at SDSN is that it very much depends where you come from, what are your aims, where you want to go, how you interpret the SDGs and sustainable development. And we provide different supports for our members, be it for organizing events or developing projects, initiatives, etc. The second focus we have is to foster transformative solution. So we actually have several solutions initiatives that we have been implementing, or that are implemented, or that we're gonna implement. One of those is the Biblio 2030, which is a project together with all libraries in Switzerland. And the aim is really to offer visibilities for the SDGs within the different libraries. But we also had a circular resource lab called Beyond Waste, where we really tried to use the real laboratory instruments to create new solutions for a particular topic of sustainable development. But we also had a special edition of Gaia that the co-chair of SDSN directed. We organize a sustainability week for business together with 2 of our members, etc., etc. We have different initiatives where we try really to mainstream the SDG, where we try to develop together solution. The highlights for the coming months and years is that we have our annual call for 3 new solution initiatives. So basically each year we try to co-finance initiatives of our members or other organizations that really have a project that brings that try to implement one or several solutions or pathway towards sustainable development. Newly, we are also developing a flagship project for SDSN Switzerland. So we're kind of a young organization and network, and it was very important for us that we think about what is the added value of SDSN. Are we just another network for sustainable development? Are we just another network of people trying to do the right thing? Or can we be a little bit more than that? And we decided to really have one flagship project where we try with different actors of the field to develop a pathway towards a sustainable state. And for this, we decided to implement our first flagship project in the topic of food systems. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about it afterward. And then we also have events to promote and support solution initiatives, member partners, etc. Our third focus is advice part, or the advisory work for decision makers. We have several instruments for that. One are different publications that we've made with partners. But maybe some of you also know that the Federal Council had conducted a consultation on a sustainable development strategy very recently. And SDSN has organized several events for the community, for all the organizations that are interested in working on this field, to be able to exchange about this strategy, what was good, what was missing. So we supported our members also in the drafting of their position. And of course, we've sent also ourselves an opinion during this consultation process. In any case, we think that there are 3 main aspects that must absolutely be improved and corrected by the Federal Council before it adopts now the final version, the final draft of this strategy. And the first one is that we need to fully tackle Switzerland's cross-border responsibility, because our major leverage on the SDGs is our global impact. So we need to improve significantly our transboundary spillover effects. We need to decrease the global footprint of our consumption, which means mainstreaming the idea of sufficiency, the idea of promoting the idea of less consumption, even though I would say I prefer the way of saying a better consumption. And it's also very important in this regard to build Switzerland as a sustainable financial center to address unfair and unsustainable financial flows. Switzerland has a particularly big responsibility in this area. And it's very important, of course, for our global responsibility, but also for the long-term resilience of our financial sector as a major contributor to our national well-being. The second point is that it lacks concrete solution to prevent the fundamental ecological and social crises that are highlighted by science. In order to address this point, we need the involvement of key actors from science, business, and civil society in the development of a goal-oriented action plan. Because maybe what you need to know is that this strategy of the Federal Council should be implemented through an action plan, which nobody has seen for the moment, and we're not even really sure gonna get any consultation on the action plan. So basically there are the big direction and line and not very precise action areas that are highlighted in this strategy. And it's always said, yes, it will all come in the action plan, but probably the action plan will stay a very only in the administration, federal administration, and not really be consulted and implemented with other actors. And this is a big problem for the implementation of the goals. And we also need sufficiently ambitious targets. And we also need to take very seriously the blockages and direction, the blockages that we face within the SDG, within the context of Switzerland, and we need the political courage to look at policy coherence and to address policy coherence. Exactly. And the third and last part is that we need to ensure a financial plan to have the sufficient means for this transformative change that we're trying to make with this strategy. Because right now the budgeting is just delegated to the offices, to the different administration offices, and it will just end up to be push back and forth between the offices, and there is the high risk that there is never going to be financing for the implementing of this strategy. So we're trying really to take some influence on this strategy, to work together with the administration, to work together with our members in order for Switzerland to have at least a good strategy, because there is no way we're going to implement any kind of strategy if the strategy itself is not working on the first place. So the highlights for this third focus, raising awareness for the SDG among decision makers, we would like to, I have to say, in the upcoming months and years, this is one of the three focus that we will probably develop the strongest. So I've mentioned it already that SDS in Switzerland really was very much involved in the development of the strategy and pushing for a better strategy, and we're still, of course, trying to get the best out of it. We're also of course talking with different people and trying to push ambition regarding the next Swiss country report about the implementation of the SDGs. And we're trying now to really increase our exchanges with political decision makers. We're trying to set up a parliamentary group in Bern about the SDGs, the really cross-cutting topics and parties in order to move forward. So if we try to put a little bit in perspective everything that I've said, and how does it look like for 2021 for SDSN and its members, so which will try to strengthen the Swiss voice for the SDG, be it through our different events, being through the help and support that we offer our network, being through our publication. And we want to really strengthen the leadership and governance around the SDGs. So there is the strategy of the Federal Council I've mentioned, but there is also this parliamentary group that we are trying to put up in order to strengthen the knowledge transfer. And there is this transformation project, this flagship project that we really want to try as a in the area of food system. It we'd like to call it a Tavola Svizzera, organize a Swiss Food System Summit, because I mean, maybe some of you are active in this field of the food system, and it's, especially right now with the upcoming votation, it's a topic where there are a lot of polarization, a lot of actors that are kind of blocks. It's very typical for the blockage that I was talking about. And the SDS, the Switzerland, as a broad network, as a neutral actor, can maybe play this role of moderating a dialogue, moderating a participatory process that might bring us further than the very confrontational and blockage attitudes that that several actors have in this era so far. So that was, in a nutshell, a little bit of SDSN and SDGs and who we are and what we're trying to do. If you want to find more information, you're more than welcome to look up in the internet, our website. We're also on social media, or just like reach out.
So this is going to be a two-voice talk, and Fabrizio and I are very happy to have the opportunity to share and somewhat crash test some of the thought we've had recently. And this is a reflection that could only materialize because of the networking created by CLIMACT. Without CLIMACT, we might not have met, and we have to say that not only we are from the same university, but we are also working on the same building and actually even at the same floor. So thank you, CLIMACT. So the starting point of this work is the peaking media attention on climate change and global warming that we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years. And this increasing media attention to climate change has been driven by catastrophic meteorological events such as fires in California, Australia, or the cold wave in Texas, but also some political events such as the Friday's climate strikes. But it also results from a higher effort put into the communication around scientific publication on climate change. And this media coverage creates a momentum and enlarges the window of opportunity by which climate change research could act in engaging society towards climate action. What we are questioning here is not how much is communicated about climate change, it's whether the climate change research that is put to the front page is actually fit to the challenge of engaging public action. So we wanted to analyze the content of the science that is brought to the media, and which is this climate change science that is brought to public attention. Can we derive some characteristic features from this science that is mediatized? And are these features actually fit to the purpose of changing individual and collective behaviors? And if not, is there any way forward? So to do that, we retrieved the corpus of scientific publication on the topic of climate change for the full year 2020. And we use the altmetric scores as a way to measure media attention. Within the scores, we use the news score, which records the number of citation of the given scientific article into newspapers. From that, we kind of sketched a topological analysis of mediatized papers overall versus the overall production of knowledge in climate change research. And we're extracting some characteristic features of the mediatized science that we confronted to the social triggers of action. So altogether, there were about 50,000 papers published about climate change in 2020 for a total since the beginning of the 80s of about 500,000. And this paper drained 36,000 citations in newspapers. What you have on the left-hand side are the top 10 mediatized papers in 2020. And it's not a joke, there is still a polar bear story in the paper that get most attention from the media even now. So that's a lot of citation in the media, a lot of papers, but of course the media attention is not uniformly distributed of the papers. And actually 9% of the paper made at least one citation in the newspapers or in the news, and only 2% of them gain an attention that is more than 10 citations in newspaper. So there is a selectivity. Some papers are selected to appear in the media and gained a lot of attention. So we were willing to analyze what was driving this selectivity and eventually what were the consequences of this selectivity on the content of the message that is mediatized. So we first questioned whether there was a selectivity by journals, and we started just by analyzing the top 10 journals, so scientific journals, in terms of publication of research connected to climate change and to appearance in the media. As you can see on the left-hand side, the journals that could publish or produce the most, the highest number of papers in terms of climate change are Sustainability, Science of the Total Environment, and Journal of Cleaner Production. But those journals are not those that appear the most in the media. Actually, the 3 journals that appear the most are Natural Communication, PNAS, and Scientific Reports. Meaning that appearance in the media is not conditioned by the amount of science you produce or you publish in terms of climate change. If you try to plot the contribution of a journal to the overall publication, to the contribution of this journal to the media news, you see that for this 5,000 journal, the data cloud is just merely aligned with the 1.1 line. If everything was aligned there, it would mean that the production or the appearance of a journal in the news would be conditioned by the amount of science they produce. But the relationship is actually quite weak. When you superimpose onto that the impact factors of the journals, you realize that journals with high impact factors over 8, they are almost all of them well above this 1-to-1 line, meaning that actually journals, top-tier journals or journals with high impact factors are 10 to 100 times overrepresented in the media as compared to what they produce in terms of science. So there is a kind of a selectivity by the media according to what we call the traditional criteria for scientific reputation, so the non-DORA criteria for excellence. So it seems that media are driven by the same criteria that kind of academia. Then we dig a bit deeper into the content of those papers, and we compare the top 100 mediatized papers to a random sample of the same time within the whole production of science of the same year. And first you see that overall in the random sample, 60% of the paper come from natural sciences, and then 12% come from social sciences and technology and engineering for almost 20% as well. But in the mediatized papers, there is an overwhelming representation of natural sciences that makes up to 3/4 of what is provided to the media. And the great losers are actually engineering and technology and also social sciences, which proportion is decreased to lower than 5%. So there is a change, a bias in the representation of discipline in the mediatized papers. After that, we focused only on papers on natural sciences because they were overrepresented. And we looked at the claim motive for the study of these papers, still again, this random subsample and this top 100. And we could categorize the motive into 7 different categories. And for this random subset, there was somewhat of an even distribution in between these 5 first categories, which were a motive for process understanding, documentation or measuring the rate and magnitude of climate-driven changes, articles which motive were to evaluate or assess the efficiency of some measures or remediation measures, projections, and model improvement or development of new methods. But for the top 100 mediatized papers, the objectives were much less diverse and quite focused around quantification of rate and magnitude of climate-driven changes and projections, while all the other objectives were very well underrepresented. We also work on the time and space scales of the studies, and we could show that for the random sample, the space scales of the study were essentially national and local scales, while on the top 100 article, the focus was mainly on global and continental scales. For time scale, there was a slight shift towards projection by the end of the century in the top 100 mediatized papers. And last thing we looked at was the representation of humanities. So first we looked at the explicit degree of human consideration in the papers. So we looked at whether there was an explicit mention of the degree of societal relevance of the study, still natural science papers, whether there were other human stressors that were included, so whether other things than climate change were considered in the paper, and whether there were some quantified consequences on societies. overall, and whatever the subset, the degree of human consideration was always rather low, below 25% approximately. And it was quite similar in between the two subsets, except for the random paper that has a slightly higher inclusion of other human stressors. Only half of the papers, whatever the subset considered, actually mention a potential lever of action. The difference was that in between the random and the top 100 papers, in the random subset, there was a much higher consideration of potential local level of action through management, adaptation, and warning as compared to the top 100 papers. So actually, the science, the climate science that gets brought to the public is only a very specific part of the climate change science that is actually produced. And it has quite typical features. And we can kind of sketch a Chinese portrait of this kind of science that gets brought to the media. It describes the magnitude and severity of change for natural Earth component on something that looks like an unpopulated Earth surface, with projection by the end of the century done at the global scale, with limited mention of lever of action. And this is done by the least optimistic scenarios. So the way our climate change science is depicted by the media is that we are basically sentinels and whistleblowers of natural changes on the Earth's surface. And this is basically the role that we are now, which we are actually conveyed into the media. So now I leave the floor to you, Fabrizio.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So the question we tried to answer was whether this is a good strategy to breed individual and collective action. And the short answer is no. And we will try to describe why. So first of all, as Marie-Elodie explained, there's a lot of mediatization of information on climate change, but the question is whether people attend to this information once it's mediatized. And there is a lot of work on information processing that shows that people and groups selectively expose themselves to information. There is a self-serving bias in exposure to information, whereby people attend to information that are consistent with what they already think. And therefore, even if it's breaking news, it's not granted that people will attend to this information. This tendency is nowadays exaggerated by the fact that many online media provide people with information that correspond to what they have selected in the past. So this confirmation bias is accentuated by online media. So this creates a tendency to avoid the inconvenient truths that media would like to convey. So that's the first mechanism. There is a second mechanism that is related to, also related to information processing. So imagine that media manage to attract attention. Will people be ready to be attentive to this information? And work on information processing showed that actually information can be processed in two ways, either in a central way with attention and effort, or in a peripheral way with distraction and very little attention. And what determines whether one way or the other is preferred is ability and motivation. The problem is that very often, as Marie-Elodie has mentioned, media report information on climate change research that is related with to faraway places like the poles or glaciers, and very distant in time. And work on psychological distance has shown that if people perceive a distance between themselves and the goal that they should reach, there is, for instance, act to mitigate climate change, well, this goal seems very unreachable, and therefore they do not initiate action. So now imagine that media managed to attract attention. Well, this is not the end of the story, because people might pay attention to information but then discount it because it might appear as overwhelming in terms of reaching the goal of mitigating climate change. And this is because of course, as an individual or as a community, it's impossible to tackle this kind of problems. People would have to develop what it's called in the social sciences collective efficacy, and this is not done most of the time. Also, most of the time, media use fear appeal, and there is a lot of research that shows the fear appeal does not work. Many campaigns have tried and they failed. Fear appeal works only when the message suggests levers for action, which is not done most of the time, as Marie-Elodie mentioned. So the situation is that a lot has been done to convey information, and actually this works very well. People are aware that climate change is a serious problem, as shown by the Eurobarometer, but knowledge is not the same as action. So we would like to propose that we should change the model that we use in science communication. This is the current model. So there is a lot of communication that is done on climate change research that quantifies and projects climate change, very little on decision-oriented solution, and even less on social processes. And we would like to propose that actually effective science communication should try to combine these three elements within the same article. So if there is breaking news about climate research that shows that we are in dire straits, okay, this can be conveyed, but maybe it should also be articulated with proposed solutions that would reduce the anxiety created by this fear appeal, and the social sciences have tools that are fit to this end. A few levers for action. So maybe we should build capacities within the academia to gain independence from the publishers. We might want to organize DORA-like prioritization of the mediatized science. We might also want to move from being watchers or whistleblowers or sentinels to doers, and as proposed for mediatization, even in research, we might want to promote risky interdisciplinary research that combine whistleblowing with solution to decision makers, with care for levers for actions directed to the general public. And that's also an idea, like we scientists have a media training. maybe journalists might benefit from science training, and we could generate some dialogue with media on that topic. So thank you very much for your attention, and we welcome comments, advice,